Hey there, and welcome to the People Who Help People podcast. This is the spot for HR and people ops pros who are all about building better businesses by putting people first. We chat with founders and experts who've been there, done that, and are generous enough to share what actually works. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, everyone. In this episode, I'm happy to be speaking with Nazma Rosado, executive coach, principal consultant at Avion Consulting, president of Transformative Consulting, adjunct professor, and noted speaker about learning to think like a CEO, not a consultant. Welcome, Nazma.
Thank you, Craig. I'm very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you here. So, Nazma, tell me a little bit more about what you do.
I think you covered it quite a bit just in the introduction, but essentially I'm a management consultant. So I work with organizations, everything from organizational design. So how do you structure your organization? How do you grow organically, but strategically, to working on culture development? How do you make sure that, the organization is staying true to what you need it and want it to be? And then we do everything from succession planning to developing learning journeys. So, what is that career ladder? It all ties together, right? From entry to exit, how do we support you, help you learn, grow, and develop? And I would say I spend a considerable amount of time serving as an executive coach. So, having those deep conversations one on one with CEOs and C suite staff and understanding from their perspective what they actually need, not only, from their people, but from themselves.
Terrific. That's quite varied. And how long have you been doing this?
Oh, geez. I've been doing it for a very long time. About, let's say, 2019, I actually decided to step out of industry. I grew up in pharma and biotech. I spent almost 30 years working in that industry. And then 6 years ago, right before 2020, in 2019, I decided to go out on my own and do the things that I love the most, which was connecting with leaders, talking with people, understanding what challenges were from a people dimension, and then, moving that forward. Prior to that, while I was in pharma and biotech, I spent about 20 of my almost 30 years there working on process optimization, organizational development, and learning and development. So I had been doing some executive coaching as well as just trying to understand what were the pain points that people in the organization had at every level and then how to best solve for those.
So you mentioned pharma and biotech. Do you find many of your clients are in pharma and biotech, or have you diversified?
I've diversified actually. So you had mentioned Transformative Consulting, which is the company I started with my husband in 2019. In 2021, I joined Avion Consulting for two reasons. Well, for several reasons. First of all, I am a people person, and working on your own or working solely with your spouse, it gets a little bit, quiet. And so I really yearned for having that larger group that I could leverage really and learn from. And this was just a fantastic group of people and a really excellent decision on my part. But one of the things that it really did for me was open up different industries, which was something I was craving. I wanted to see how solutions that worked in biotech and pharma, did they work in, big law firms? Did they work in healthcare systems? Did they work with, large automotive industries? Or not? Did I need to shift my thinking in some way? So I now work across pretty much everything, finance, law, and I love it because it's being able to see theory into practice in different ways.
So Nazma, by moving from Transformative Consulting, your own firm that you started with your husband, to Avion Consulting in 2021, not only did you join that bigger team and make you part of something even greater, but that it exposed you to new industries, and you wanted to see if what worked in biotech and pharma worked there as well. So what I'm assuming it did, many of the same things did, but what did you find was different?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what was different was, I think, perhaps perspective, right? So in pharma and biotech, everything is so data driven, and that's true across every industry, but the data is different, and what you're looking for and how you're utilizing it is very different. So working with an organization that maybe, does forensic accounting or something like that, and they're the ones that testify in big big trials and such. Very different way of using data, very different things that they're looking at, and a very different perspective, right? If you're a testifying expert as opposed to if you are the head of clinical operations at a pharma company. So it was just kind of looking at the different lenses that they used to look at what they needed, how they needed it presented to them, and how they encouraged their people to get there. Right. So how hierarchical is the organization running? I think egos are big across all of these industries. It doesn't really matter. If you put in the work and you've gotten to a certain level, some folks are just naturally very hierarchy driven or very much in one mindset versus others. And then even looking at, I work with CEOs from various hospitals, just really interesting to see with them what works in the operating room does not work outside of the operating room, right? So it's just sort of those filters of looking at the differences of how they approach the work and the strategies that they need to engage in is really what's different.
Got it. So different lenses. I like that. Different perspectives in different settings. I like how you framed that up, those differences. So you said you work a lot with CEOs, and the title of our podcast today is Learning to Think Like a CEO and Less Like a Consultant. So in your journey, in your 6-year journey, you've, I assume, elevated your thinking from I'm a consultant to I'm a significant contributor in this business, whether it was with your own business or now with Avion. What are some of those ways that you've had to shift your mindset to allow you to scale both your reach and your impact?
I think it is understanding truly what servant leadership is and what it means. Servant leadership, as we all know, is really sort of that elevated level of leadership that we all want to get to, where we're really working in service of others. However, that doesn't mean that you're not working with them in partnership. So it's a little bit about knowing your value, know what you bring to the table, and having that confidence and belief in your own abilities, your own expertise, but also in the homework you do to prepare for the discussions and dialogues that you're having. It's really about taking ownership of being a partner and having the organization and that leader as your primary focus. How am I going to help you achieve your goals? Which is, it's a different sort of context, because if we only think of ourselves as a consultant, we tend to at times see us more in that service realm where, tell me what you need and I can help provide it for you. This is a little different. It's more of the tell me what you're struggling with and let's figure out the best path there. Right. So it's really about partnership and ownership more so than pure service.
Tell me what you're struggling with and let me help you work through that. Got a question. Are you using AI as you're either researching those leaders that you'll be working with or coming up with strategies for helping them address their struggle?
I am a huge fan of AI. So I feel like AI, like any other technology, we learn how to adapt, we learn how to leverage it. And we also learn where maybe it's not really ready for the great ideas that we have. I do not use AI to do my research on individuals. I don't even look up people on LinkedIn. I'm always a little creeped out when I meet someone and they're like, they know more about me than I know about me. It's like, oh, okay. They've done their research. Doing research is a good thing. But I think sometimes being like, oh, I stalked your LinkedIn and start feeding back data from 25 years ago can seem a little weird. I don't do that because to a certain extent, especially when we're first meeting, I really don't care what your credentials are. I don't care where you've worked. I want to hear from you, how you present yourself, right? How you see yourself and what are the things. I learn a lot in just listening. So I don't use AI to do any of that deep dive. And when it comes to even strategy, I don't use it for that either. As a coach, if I'm coaching an individual, I don't take any notes because I don't think it's necessary to actually document anything an individual is saying to me. That's your information. I'm definitely not recording it. I'm not recording it via AI to have like transcripted notes or at the end or any of that. I just actively listen to what you're saying and I remember it because I'm engaged. So I don't need to, spend time doing all of those things. Now, do I use it for strategy? no, because based on what you're saying to me, I will tell you, well, how about this? Have you tried this? What are your thoughts on this? What have you done? Right. Where I would use it is maybe if I'm like, is there a technique for something? Or is there a certain paradigm that I should consider in coaching someone for whatever it is? And maybe plug that in and see what it comes up with, because it's much more efficient than starting from a blank slate when there's something pre-existing that maybe I don't know about or has emerged since I learned whatever it is that I've learned.
Got it. So I always self-reflect during these podcasts, and I studied your background on LinkedIn before I set up this podcast. I'm taking copious notes as you're talking, and this whole thing is being recorded. So there you go. 3 strikes against me. But
Not at all.
no, that's just the nature of prepping for a podcast. I'm teasing. So I liked what you said there. I liked what you said about actively listening during the conversation, fully engaging your brain, because of course we did all that prior to AI ever coming along. And somehow, although AI can help us help amplify the what we're doing, it should never be a replacement for us engaging our brain. Hopefully it just takes your 20, 30 years of experience helping others and makes you that much better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think technology is there to enable us, not to direct us. You should have our own strategies in mind and then utilize it to leverage all of the thinking that's available everywhere. I also think that, especially, it's still somewhat early days when we talk about AI. It's a lot of trust but verify, right? Like, really ask for what are the sources that you're pulling this from, and making sure that it's not just actually talking into an echo chamber where it's just telling you what it thinks you want to hear, but using various AIs to sort of say, hey, fact check this or look into that. So I think it's very useful. I just think that what I do is so deeply embedded in the personal human experience. I'm not threatened by AI, and I also feel like it's not useful for me in those situations.
How about your clients? How about those executives who are wondering, they're hearing all this noise about improving their business using AI? How much are you hearing that?
Yeah.
Is it growing
So
louder? What's your experience there?
of course, there's hesitation, right? And I think the two main things that people are concerned about are um, just privacy and confidentiality and issues like that. And the other is like regulatory concerns. Are we in compliance or are we out of compliance by using this? Where does the data go? How can that best serve us? What I'm seeing is a lot of curiosity, and some companies that you might think would be shying away from it, are actually deeply diving into it, which is really wonderful to see. And some organizations that you might think might be more on the cusp of like that cutting edge of trying to try new things are a little bit more hesitant. So, I mean, I would say it's further proof that stereotypes, or drawing assumptions really is futile, because at the end of the day it has to do with who's the leader and what does the board as well as that leadership team feel is comfortable and right for them. So I'm seeing a lot of adoption of AI tools. I'm seeing a whole lot of organizations who are building their own internal tools, so kind of creating their own AI bots and whatnot, which I think is sort of a really nice midpoint. If we're not quite sure we want to go all the way out there and put it into chat GPT, let's create our own internally. So we're leveraging the science and the technology, but we're not necessarily opening ourselves up to the risk that we fear.
Sure. Does a particular example come to mind? You said some organizations that you wouldn't think would use it are using it, and it's so great to see. Is there an example that comes to mind there?
Yeah, there's two finance firms that we work with that are really deeply leveraging AI. Now, it's a very compliance driven industry. One of which it was an organization I was referencing before in terms of their testifying witnesses on some big trials and whatnot. So they have to be really careful what they put out there as well as what they trust and what they believe in. But they're using it, they're leveraging it, which is really cool to see that they have established parameters. When can we use it? How can we use it? What are you putting in, and what are we comfortable with? And they're verifying it with their research analysts and other folks to make sure that what's in there is valid. I've also seen some law firms use it robustly, and lawyers are always perhaps the most hesitant to take on new technology wisely. They're trained to think that way. So seeing them kind of leverage it gives me greater comfort.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit. I noticed when I was stalking you on LinkedIn that you listed you are the track lead of Startup Curious in Startup Boston. And I'd like to know more about what is Startup Boston and what does it mean to be a track lead of something called Startup Curious.
So Startup Boston is an organization that is largely volunteer run. I think they only have maybe like 5 actual internal employees at most. It's really focused on amplifying the ecosystem surrounding startups in the Boston area. And I became involved in it when, a few years ago, I was asked to be on a panel at Startup Boston Week, which is their week-long conference that happens every year in September. And I really was I hadn't heard of it before. And I thought, that's really weird. I work in biotech in the Boston area. How have I not heard of this? Because it's one thing we know, it's startups. And I really was very surprised to see how well attended the event was. Over the span of 5 days, there were so many people coming and going, and it was venture capitalists. You had founders, you had people who had an idea but weren't sure, does this thing have legs? Folks who were looking for, well, we need to patent this. Is there a patent lawyers? All of these different elements of that startup ecosystem was present. And so the following year, I decided to become a little bit more involved and to sign up to help organize. I took on the role of track lead for the Startup Curious track. So there's a track for kind of everything, right? If you want to learn about funding, if you want to learn about HR and that aspect for startups, what they need to consider or whatnot. And Startup Curious is if you are interested in startups, but you don't know, do I have something that has legs, or is it the right space for me? Is it too risky? Like, what is my comfort level with all of that? And so it was a really great experience. And so this year, I'm actually the track lead for Hot Industries. The conference is actually timely. It kicks off next week. Which is on September 8th is the first day of the 5 days. And so for Hot Industries, we're looking at things like food tech and property tech and automation and AI and all of these things that for me, I was like, oh, prop tech. I hadn't thought about how are we using technology and AI and automation and all of these things in real estate, food tech, right? Like, how are we leveraging some of this? It's just been very interesting. And so that's basically the track that I'm working on this year. So if I stay involved as a track lead, the next year will be how do we want to focus or grow in a new stream of thinking to put forth a different track.
Got it. I like that for a lot of different reasons. One of which is when I got my MBA at Boston University, I studied entrepreneurship. And I always knew that I wanted to start up my own venture, but it took me a long career to figure out which one to start. The fact that there is a group coming together to nurture this Startup Curious and to also to provide them support. Another podcast guest that I had helps startups, people that have ideas, get launched. So very exciting discussions, I would imagine.
And I love that it's a thread that listeners to your podcast can continue to follow, right? And see,
Absolutely.
oh, okay, here's some more about that.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Nazma, is there anything we didn't discuss today that you're also passionate about? You're also an adjunct professor. How do you find time to do everything that you're doing?
So I only work on things that I love,
Okay,
right? So it doesn't, I mean, it's very cliche, but I love what I do. And I don't feel like I'm working. Like there's oftentimes like it's Friday night and I'm dying to get back to my desk to do something because I have an idea. Or I might send out an email to one of my clients because I know something was going on, like they had a big meeting that day and I want to check in and see, hey, how did that go? Did it come across, the way that we prepared for? I feel like doing these things, if it no longer serves you, take it off your list. right? And if it's something that really ignites a passion in you, you're going to find the time because you're going to want to do it. Being an adjunct professor, I have really loved it. Because for me, it's like when I do all of these leadership workshops and, the things I do in my day to day, I'm working with, someone who's had a career. They're 20, 30 years in, they're very senior. When I work with these graduate students, whether if it's at Suffolk Law School or at Framingham State, it's like they're still in this, they're learning, and they know they don't know everything, and they know that there's so much out there they haven't experienced, and their questions really make me think, and I'm able to bring that back to my clients. So I feel like it makes me a stronger consultant because I'm looking at both ends of the spectrum. If you're just now emerging, or if you've been in it a long time, right? And how much of it is you're kind of jaded, and how much of it is, no, this is really something we need to prepare for and consider and discuss deeply. So yeah, I would say just follow your passions. That's the advice I gave my kids. I'm like, study something you love, and then figure out how to monetize it later, right? Unless if it's interpretive dance and you're not a good dancer, right? And there needs to be some
Rethink
self-reflection
about
and all of that as well.
Excellent. So I love how you're thinking about your clients. That's that servant leader in you, but also that you're serving to additional communities, the startup community and students who are just starting out. And I'm willing to bet all three communities make you sharper in your quote unquote day job. So
Absolutely.
good. All right.
Absolutely.
Nasma, if folks are listening to this and they'd like to get in touch with you, how would you like them to reach out?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I check my LinkedIn twice a day, every day. I feel it's really important to grow your network, but also to stay connected with your network. And I also have my own website, which is nazmarosado.com. Very, very easy. And in either of those places, you can reach. Always make the offer to folks. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, if you have a question about something, anything, if you have a curiosity, reach out. Just what's the worst that can happen? I can respond and say, I don't know, or I'm not the right person. And if I do, I will say, but let me follow up. Right. So there's no harm, no foul, and reaching out to folks and really, again, maybe it's a little bit of paying it forward, but I think of it a little bit also as, but selfishly, I'm meeting new people. I'm learning things from these new people. And I'm growing my own sort of space in that the algorithm on LinkedIn is seeing all different people from different walks of life, different careers, whatever.
So I will add your LinkedIn link as well as your website link when I post this podcast. And speaking of which, it's time to wrap up. So thank you so much for being my guest today, Nazma. I've enjoyed our conversation, and thank you to our listeners for listening in. All right.
Yeah. Thank
Goodbye
you,
now.
Chris.
Thank you.